In the Bronze Age Aegean, aromatics played a significant role in both practical and ritual contexts. Archaeological and textual evidence suggests a sophisticated industry of perfumed oil production and the consumption of aromatics through incense burners. Linear B tablets from Pylos document scented oils produced by unguent boilers working for the palace, and linear B tablets from Knossos document the cultivation of herbs and aromatic plants, as well as the delivery of perfumes and herbs to sanctuaries and to the gods as religious offerings. My paper explores the interconnections between the ideogram AROMA, the sign previously attested in Cretan hieroglyphic and linear A, and later found in linear B, used as the unit of measurement for aromatics. And what I suggest might be the archaeological evidence for an actual object, which corresponds to the pictorial representation of AROMA, the incense burner, as well as its iconographical representation on glyphic evidence. The shape of AROMA, or aroma, is commonly interpreted as a generic cylindrical vessel. Sometimes it's been argued that it might represent for spices and herbs. But what I want to suggest is that it actually mirrors a specific object, a category of ceramic vessels consisting of a cup covered by a perforated lid, the incense burners. And obviously its content and function of burning aromatics matches its attested meaning as ideogram for spices and aromatics in linear B. Furthermore, I will suggest that the same distinctive shape of the incense burner is also represented in proto-palatial period talismanic seals, which feature schematic depictions of the vessel with this specific lid and handle, which has been previously interpreted in various ways by earlier scholarship. I will finally draw some tentative conclusions on the making of this sign shape in the Aegean scripts, and I will consider whether we shall take this sign in Cretan hieroglyphic and linear A as continuations of the same sign shape, so stemming from the same visual reference in the real world, or as parallel developments requiring different explanations concerning their origins. So I will start by addressing I will actually start by the scripts. I will address their shape and as well as their chronological and regional context in Cretan hieroglyphic, linear A, and linear B. I will suggest that they might actually represent an incense burner after giving a general overview of the possible interpretations that have been suggested by previous scholarship. And I will try to explain how their possible representation on talismanic seals might play into the making of this shape into finally arriving to linear B. And I will start from a general overview of the AROMA ideogram. I chose to use the term ideogram as we do not have any really corresponding word for this sign shape in linear B, as it usually represents in general a unit of measurement used for aromatic products, specifically coriander, Cyprus, and in the new linear B tablets from Aios Vasilios, also capo, which was tentatively interpreted as scaphos, cinnamon. This sign is the representation of a cylindrical vessel with a handle and a conical lid, and it's generally taken as the continuation of the same shape, starting from the first Cretan hieroglyphic attestations. In Cretan hieroglyphic, it's present only in one case, on one seal from the Malia steatite group. This seal is of unknown provenance, but the fact that it belongs to the Eastern Crete steatite group allow us to identify its chronological and regional context. This is a class of seals which was produced in the Malia region, and specifically there was also a workshop in Quartier Mu, and I think it's significant, and I will get to this point later, during the Middle Helladic too. And as you can see in the slide, the picture at the bottom of the slide on the left, the geographic concentration of this group of seals is focused in the eastern area of Crete. In Linear A, we have 8 attestations of this sign, with 5 from Ayatriada, 1 from Zagros, 1 from Chania, and the last one from Mount Euctas. In all cases, but Mount Euctas, the evidence points to in a late Minoan 1B as the chronology of this inscription, with Mount Euctas presenting the earliest attested case of Arom in Linear A. I will talk about it 1 second. In Linear A, the ideogram Arom is generally taken as a syllabogram, but the recent work by Philippe Pastil in her 2023 book suggests that in at least some instances, we might interpret this sign as an ideogram, as having a logographic function alongside the syllabographic function in Linear A. So in the examples that you can see in the slide, we find, let's see if I can use my laser pointer. We can find the sign followed by numerals. And it's interesting the fact that it's in 5 cases out of 8 that it's followed by numerals, suggesting that it does not necessarily belong into the syllabic sequence of a word, but it's rather in at least 5 out of 8 cases having a logographic function. A similar point can be made for Ayatriada 15, where we find this the ideogram of Arom actually followed by only 1 syllabogram, which is A. So still suggests that in this case we might be actually dealing with a ligature, as we'll see also in Linear B, when we have the ideogram followed by a specific syllabogram which modifies the meaning, actually identifying the content of the spices that the tablet is dealing with. So in this case, we might have a first syllabographic sequence, U34C, which might represent an anthroponym or a place name, followed by, with like a specular situation, what might be the ideogram for grain, and do another modifier of the ideogram, followed then by AROMA, and its ligatured A. And the same case might be actually made for the only tablet from Zagros where we find Linear A, Arom, which is preceded by this syllabogram T. As regards to the shape, we see a certain regularity with the presence of 1 handle, the absence of horizontal lines, which instead we'll notice in the shape of Arom in Linear B, and the presence of a pyramidal or ogival lid. Only 1 case stands out, which is the only one inscription from Mount Euctas, for the presence of 3 dots on the lid, which I will comment in a second. So, as I was mentioning before, this is the first attestation of a Linear A sign, Arom. It's attested on a labation table dated to the MM3 LM1. And the pseudogram in this case is preceding the labation formula, Yasa Sara. The 3 dots have been commented by Carezzo, Godard, and Olivier as being decorative and just filling the lid of the sign. But one might argue that the three dots might actually signal in something different. And I will come to this in a second. As regards the attestation of linear B, we have more than 35 instances of AROM, either preceded or ligatured with Cyprus and coriander. I said it's a unit of measurement for aromatic products, and it appears in a variety of contexts, ranging from collection of spices and aromatic products as taxis, as in the GA tablets in Mycenae, to the delivery of aromatics to the palace, as in the GA series at Knossos, as well as in the production of perfumed oils, attested in the UN tablets at Pylos. And this is one of the most famous examples of the attestations of AROM in linear B. We can see here 6 units, each corresponding to 96 liters of these dry commodities of seeds of coriander, corigliadana, also attested as corigliadono in the singular, and cuparo in lines 5 and 6. This tablet corresponds to a delivery of aromatic products and other ingredients to a perfume boiler, tueta or tiestes, defined as the arepazzo, the unguent boiler in charge of the production of perfumed oils. What is interesting is that the term used to indicate the aromatic products is the term tuea, and this term corresponds to thuos and thuea in Homer, where it literally indicates a burnt offering. And I will comment on this aspect later. As regards the shape of this ideogram in linear B, we find a certain variation, again, as in linear A, with the shape of the lid, which can be ogival or pyramidal, the presence or absence of a handle, as well as the presence of 1 up to 3 lines inside the cylindrical body of the ideogram. But what is interesting is that if we take into account attestations of these signs produced by the same scribe, we can see actually a certain variation by the same hand. So it must have not been that significant. As regards the interpretation of AROM, the first idea was to connect it to a granary, given its shape. But the presence of a handle in most of its attestations actually contradicts this first hypothesis by Evans, and Ventris and Chadwick proposed to identify it as a pepper pot. And this interpretation as a cylindrical vessel, characterized by a conical lid, or even a size container, was later taken on and commonly agreed by all scholars. And interestingly, Perna notes that we might even interpret this as a vessel, but not a real vase. But the problem was to identify some actual archaeological parallels for this shape. Mandenabelle and Olivier suggested 3 possibilities: a clay rhyton from Thira, which you can see on the right in the slide, as well as a bronze vessel from the royal tombs at Dendra, or a wicker basket attesting glyptic evidence. But both the clay rhyton from Thira as well as the bronze vessel are dated, actually the first to the late Cycladic one and the second to the early 14th century. So their late dates and actually the lack of parallels made it quite difficult to explain really how they might relate to Arum. And we'll move now to what I suggest might actually be the object represented by Arum, the incense burner. This is a specific category of vessels, which is, it's quite problematic because it's the publications by Georgiou in the 70s and 80s are mainly concerned with the later example dated to the late Minoan and the late Helladic 2 and 3. As regards the previous periods, some comprehensive work is actually still missing. But in any case, we can see that in various sites on Crete and on the Cycladic islands, these vessels are attested starting from the Middle Minoan too. So the very same period of the first attestation of Arum on Cretan hieroglyphic. And we can see first examples from the most ancient examples from Malia, as well as Middle Minoan 3 examples of incense burners from Festos, where they were found in a Celtic context, whereas in Malia they come from Cartier Mu. And what is interesting that I really want to point out is the variability in shape, whereas in some examples we have the presence of 3 legs, which are also found in the later examples, the late Minoan examples in Kea and Knossos. We can also see some variability within the same site, like the absence of any legs and the difference in the rendering of the walls in the examples from Festos. As regards the late Minoan 1A and 1B examples, we have at least 10 incense burners attested from periods 6 and 7 at Kea, at the site of Aia Irini, that you can see in the slide, as well as at least 1 example from the Northwest Treasury at Knossos, with this very characteristic curl shape. And as regards the later example, the late Minoan and late Helladic 2 and 3, we can find several, they are attested both on the mainland and on Crete. And they are specifically connected to funerary contexts, possibly attesting the use in funerary rites. But in any case, what is really the main characteristic, the feature characterizing this typology of vessels, is the presence of a pierced lid, obviously to allow the smoke to actually be diffused in the air. And you can see some actually experiments by Trevis and Trevis at Instap, where they try to replicate this typology of vessels, as well as other vessels connected to unguent production. And so you can see here some examples with charcoal, lampwood charcoal, as well as resins. And it was very interesting to have them described as brought back to life, as Trevis and Trevis described, that they could really effective in their shape. The fact of having a lid with perforations could actually retain the heat, prolongating the time of burning to up to 6 to 8 hours. And also the presence of the handle, as well as the lid itself, allowed also for the object to be moved around quite easily. And I will now discuss a possible category of objects, which I think might be a representation of incense burners. And it's a category of objects which is dated more or less to the same period as we see the first attestations of incense burners on Crete and in the Cyclades. It's a class called talismanic seals, dated to the MM3 late Minoan one. This specific shape, this motif that you can see in the slide, recurs 17 times on this category of seals, with a general concentration in central Crete, in the Messara, and on eastern Crete. The interpretation ranged from rustic shrine, which was later considered impossible because, again, as the same considerations that were made for the shape of Aaron, the presence of the handle, as well as the presence of horns of consecration and other cultic objects as the jag or ears, kind of made it impossible to reconcile with the image of an actual building. It's been also suggested that it might represent a hat-shaped sacred vessel without really specifying which kind of vessel we might actually see in the archaeological record corresponding to this motif. In the most recent hypothesis was suggested by Crowley in her latest work on seal iconography published last year. But nevertheless, the shape as well as the dimensions do not really fit with the actual archaeological record that we have of bee smokers, which are characterized by usually 2 handles and 2 feet, a more prolonged and more rounded ending, perforated ending. And also the cultic context in which this vessel clearly recurs in these iconographic representations would rather point to a different kind of interpretation, as, for example, an incense burner, which, again, we can easily see attested in both funerary cultic context as well as religious context. But in any case, I think that it's quite convincing, the idea of seeing these wavy lines, which were previously interpreted as snakes, as actually representing the smoke produced by the act of burning incense. And before discussing the actual making of AROMA, I wanted to say a few words about the making of a script in general, as so many brilliant works have been published lately by Salgarella or Ferrara and her team. And so we have several examples, both in hieroglyphic, in Cretan hieroglyphic, as well as in linear scripts, of the act of making the script, starting from real-world reference. So the real-world reference can be images and objects that we see, we experience in our natural world, that can be later transferred either directly into the script or indirectly, in a second scenario, through the mediation of motifs on other media. And I think that this provides an excellent theoretical framework to try to understand how our real-world reference, our incense burner, might have translated into the 3 Aegean scripts. I think that there are 2 options possible. In option A, we have, again, like on the one hand, the development of the sign shape, starting from Cretan hieroglyphic and then being passed on in linear A and linear B. And on the other end, its iconographic representation on talismanic seals. But I think that it's also possible to envision a different scenario, which takes into account the role the growing role that in scholarship we start seeing about the mediation of talismanic seals, the role of the iconography of seals in general, its influence on the linear scripts. So we can suggest in this second scenario that the Cretan hieroglyphic sign was made, its shape was made with starting from the real world referent on the one hand, and on the other hand, that the real world referent was actually the source for the production of this iconographic motif on talismanic seals, which was then later translated in linear A and in linear B. So in a separate development from the Cretan hieroglyphic. And when we look at the geographical and chronological context of the attestations of the only Cretan hieroglyphic inscriptions that we have, it actually fits nicely with the earliest attestations that we have in the archaeological record, as they, as said, the incense burners among the earliest incense burners that we have come from Quartier Mu at Malia. Whereas the provenance of our Cretan hieroglyphic attestation is unknown, as I mentioned earlier, it's belonging to the Malia Steatite group, strongly suggests that this seal was produced in that region, and most probably this seal was produced in the workshop, in the seal workshop at Quartier Mu. And on the other hand, the attestations of incense burners at Festos, as well as Knossos and Kea, and the presence of talismanic seals with this possible incense burner motif in north and central Crete, as well as in the Messara, it fits well with the possible development of the linear A sign shape in these regions. And I just want to make now some brief remarks on the actual formal aspect of the making of AROMA, how this pictorial representation works in relation to the incense burners that we've seen in the archaeological record. As I mentioned, the lead is certainly the most important element. It's the distinctive feature which really characterizes the category of these archaeological objects, as well as, in general, like all the attestations in linear A, linear B, and Cretan hieroglyphic. Whereas we have some variations in the presence or absence of handle, in the presence or absence of horizontal lines within the body of the vessel, the lead remains the most distinctive feature. And obviously, the earliest linear A attestation of Arom, which is on the Euctus libation table, is characterized by these three dots, which I would argue perfectly represent the pierced lead, the perforated lead of the incense burner. And the reason why we find these three dots here and we don't find it elsewhere is obviously because of the religious aspect of the libation table, as well as its materiality. Obviously, we need to take into consideration the use of clay versus stone, and like an economic and administrative context versus a religious context, as the one we see attested for the Euctus inscription. As regards the absence of three legs, again, I think that the lead is the real distinctive feature of this ideogram, and also the presence of three legs might have caused ambiguity with another very well attested vessel logogram, which is the tripod. And I also want to underline the regional as well as chronological variability, as not all instances of incense burners actually present 3 legs. As regards the presence of 1 or 2 or 3 bands, horizontal lines in the linear B attestations of AROM, I might tentatively argue that perhaps they might represent the presence of painted bands that you can see here in the 2 LM2 and LM3 examples, as all these later Minoan incense burners are often characterized by painted decoration and specifically the presence of horizontal bands. And I would also like to just tentatively suggest that the presence of an S-shaped handle in some of the linear B attestations of design, it curiously mirrors the presence of S-shaped handles in some of the talismanic seals representations. So one might wonder if perhaps there were also like some linear A paleographic rendering of these S handles that just do not survive. What I would like to suggest is, given the presence of the term tuea as indicating aromatic products and its derivation from the Indo-European term to indicate smoke, and given the parallels with Tocharian and Hittite, respectively, verbs to ignite and to produce smoke, I'm wondering if the use of this term to indicate aromatic products actually reflects the same notion by the Mycenaeans, the same perception of using the same connection of burning aromatics that is reflected also in the use of a logogram actually representing a vessel for burning these aromatics. So to conclude, I hope I made a case to argue that the ideogram AROM is the representation, the pictorial representation of a specific kind of vessel, the incense burner. This identification is supported by its shape. It's being a cylindrical vessel with a conical lid. It's reinforced by the presence of a perforated lid in one linear A example, the inscription from Mount Euctas. This association is also reinforced, obviously, by its meaning in linear B, its connection with aromatics. The fact that, as Philippa still suggests, it might have already had a logographic function in linear A supports the hypothesis that it might have retained the same meaning even in this period. And finally, its connection with the word tuea, perhaps suggesting that the Mycenaeans actually associated burning aromatics with this specific kind of commodity. I also tentatively suggested that the incense burner might be represented on talismanic seals, and that these representations might have possibly played a role in inventing this sign in linear A, in the hypothesis that the creation of AROM followed 2 different trajectories, one in Cretan hieroglyphic and one in linear A, mediated by the iconographic representation on talismanic seals. And I hope I also showcased the advantages of a multidisciplinary approach in the study of the invention of writing. Thank you.